I think the big takeaway was you have to be all in to being able to make things and change things, but also to create new revenue streams that maybe are a little bit outside of the box. And so I think those are all some great takeaways of what the modern dealership is going to look like. And so we're going to continue moving forward in our sessions. Now listen, you guys are in my living room, right? So we're comfortable with one another, okay? So I'm going to tell you, one of the biggest things that you have as a host, and one of your biggest fears as a host, is mispronunciation of names. It's like one of those things, you know? And it's when it's good names or it's, you know, just one or two names, it's really easy. But sometimes, as you can see them bringing out the chairs, we have a large panel. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna go through these names. And the gentleman in the back, I already told him, I say, if I make a mistake, it's not my intention. So with that being said, I just like transparency, want you guys to know. So if I pronounce them a little bit slowly or take my time, it's just because I would prefer to get it right than try to run through it and get it wrong, right? All right, so we're gonna be talking about next how the latest standards of technology in automotive retail benefit dealers, all right? So again, it's how the latest standards for technology in automotive retail, STAR for short, benefit dealers. And to help us and do that, we're going to have our moderator, who is Rafael Maldonado. He is the VP Chief Information Technology Officer for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We have Mahesh Shah, who is EVP and Chief Product and Technology Officer for CDK. We have Manish Maharota, who is our Executive Director for Digital Business Planning and Connected Ops for Hyundai Motor North America. Eric Day, who is the CFO and partner of Warren Henry Automotive Group. Guru Sankara Raman, who is our co-founder and CFO and SVP of Operations for Tican Corp. And Mike Trasati, who is the CEO for Dealer Built. So once again, give them all a round of applause as they come to the stage. And we are going to look at STAR and how the standards for technology in automotive are going to benefit us as dealers. Gentlemen, welcome. Come on in. They all rode together, by the way. They could carpool, saving on gas. All right, guys. Rafael, this is for you. Thank you. Enjoy.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Rafael Maldonado. I am the chairman of the Standards for Technology in Auto Retail. And I am also the former Vice President and Chief Information Technology Officer for NADA. So today we're gonna be talking about standards and how dealers benefit from a set of common standards that we're trying to achieve in our industry. So well, let's get started. Mike, I want to turn to you first. We speak about standards, but for the regular folks in this room that have not worked with that before, can you tell us what standards are and give us perhaps some examples of it?
Sure, I'll do my best. So standards from a 30,000 foot level, they remove friction from our lives or friction from two entities or disparate folks that want to do business together. We live in a world full of standards. We drive our vehicles in a very standard way because we know that we drive on the right side in one way, we come back on the left side. Wi-Fi in our building, we wouldn't exist. It's pretty frictionless to get Wi-Fi because there's a standard that we use that, oh, I'm going to hook up. Great, I'm going to go to Starbucks. Great. And those standards remove friction to allow things to move much more smoothly.
Awesome. Imagine a world where every single Bluetooth device that we have had a different standard and they couldn't connect to one another. That would be pretty painful, right? So that's sort of what we have in our industry. We see other industries adopt this set of standards, common standards, financial industry, online banking. We have the healthcare industry. Why do you think, and I'll turn to you, Mahesh, why do you think it's taken so long for the automotive industry to actually come together and agree on a set of common standards for auto retail?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of things have been established and in place for a very, very long time. And I think everybody, when things started, when you have a deep entrenched base of how people operate today, trying to get folks to switch to a new set of standards, which means changing a lot of how you've been doing things, is just hard in any industry. Typically what I see is it's always easiest to do when you're starting something new. So like when Bluetooth came out, it was one common standard. Everybody needed it, one common way of communicating. Everybody can adopt it, they can stop worrying about it, and they all build around that model. So in automotive, I think a large part of this is because of the fact that there's a large entrenched base, and we have to look at some of the new ways of doing it.
Anyone else wants to comment on that?
I would just expand on what Mahesh said. I think, from the dealership's perspective, we have to deal with such a broad spectrum of solution providers, and clearly there's a tremendous amount of silos out there, and it's not a clean sheet of paper. And I always say this is like trying to overhaul the airplane, but you can't land it in our business. And that's a hard thing to do. So if we could land the plane and say we're going to start it all over and customers, go away for a little bit while we figure this out, that just doesn't happen. So, we have this sort of legacy architecture, if you will, that's embedded within the industry. And I think that's been one of the drivers of the challenge. The second thing I would add to that is there really has not been an agnostic, independent body that represents the stakeholders across an industry or a vertical. And I think that's one of the challenges in our industry that has not really emerged to the forefront yet. And I think that's some of the things that we're working on with STAR is to create that agnostic approach to get the adoption across the vertical so that we can achieve what I would refer to as sort of the interoperability, as well as the integration that we need to deliver those frictionless experiences that honestly, at the end of the day, the customer's demanding from us. So we owe it to ourselves as an entire industry to come together to agree on an independent body that essentially has skin in the game for the entire ecosystem to deliver that for the customer. But we've struggled because that hasn't really emerged yet to the degree it needs to.
Yeah, and I think by us being here, we all recognize that we need to all work together, because when you look at this panel, we actually have the whole ecosystem actually represented here. So we have the standards body, we have the dealers, we have the vendors, and we have the OEMs, and we're working together to try to solve this problem. So let's talk about a problem statement. And I'd like all of you to comment, because I want everyone to hear the pain points that are associated with each one of our groups. Manish, from your perspective, what are the major pain points and challenges that you encounter because of the lack of standards, and how a set of standards like what STAR is trying to develop will benefit you from an OEM perspective?
Yeah, so I say the biggest hurdle really is, from our point of view, we're in the business of selling cars and supporting our dealers and who do the service, and we sell parts, right? Well, if we have to integrate with multiple vendors without standards, it is very difficult to do that beyond 3, 4, 5 partners. And the way our ecosystem is established, dealers have a lot of partners which integrate with the suppliers that are over here. So from a data transfer perspective, from the experience, the journey perspective, it becomes fragmented from an OEM point of view. So if there are standards, as much as we can become vendor agnostic, I think all entities can focus on the core business and use technology as the enabler instead of the hurdle that I think we face as an industry today.
Guru, I have the same question for you. So what are the pain points and challenges that you encounter in your sector as a vendor when you have to deal with so many partners, especially now that through your announcement that need to be integrated to your systems, but we don't have a common standard in the industry?
Yeah, totally. If you look at automotive industry as a whole, over a period of time, we have so many providers, dealers depend on, and all kind of varying standards or lack of standards have evolved. And what's happening is product companies like us, we want to build that frictionless experience. And to build the frictionless experience, there are a lot of things need to come together behind. The complexity involved is so much. So when you have these varying standards or lack of standards, what happens is it takes so much time and effort. And sometimes you have to duplicate that effort in multitudes with so many different providers. So it becomes an impossible journey. Even if you actually accomplish with a few sets of providers, it gets to a level where you can't replicate it to the larger industry. The industry cannot benefit from it. I think this is where having that common set of standards, where all of us can agree and come to table, it makes our life a lot easier. We all know that software is something you have to, once you write it, test it, and it's available, you can duplicate however you like. And every time you need to write a code and test it and you need to put the effort, it's not going to work. It just makes life a lot difficult for providers like us.
Yes, sometimes I say that we're trying to make a distinction without a difference when we start talking about the standards. So Mahesh, I can only imagine the nightmare that companies like yours have in order to attempt to have all your vendors integrate to your systems, and I cannot even begin to imagine the challenge of securing all those integrations. So you want to comment on the challenges and perhaps the benefits of STAR standards or common set of standards?
Yeah, look, what I would love to get to is a common way of defining data. So just think about between an iPhone and an Android. You can port your data from the iPhone to the Android, and all your contacts and everything move over. And it's because the two can recognize that, contact name, email, phone number, it's all the same. It can be ported over nice and simply. And the consumer benefits, right? Because you can switch your phones whenever you need to switch your phones. If we could get to something like that in our industry as well, just where things like, vehicle records, contact names, it would just make a lot of this communication and highway of data so much easier. And I really think the consumers would benefit. I think software providers like us would benefit. And the good thing about these standards is it allows us to innovate on the things that we want to innovate on, and not on trying to figure out how to translate, what one company's data looks like versus somebody else's data.
So Mike, can you give us an example of a challenge that you had to deal with because you didn't have standards and a pain point in your organization?
Sure.
At Dealer Build.
Sure. From my perspective, I used to write software, and now I manage the company. So we've been doing this for a while, and there's how many vendors are sitting here in this auditorium. So when you talk about, we're at NADA and about dealer choice, and I think we're all going to agree that let the dealers make choices. Now, if they want to say, you know what, I really like that. If we had a set of common standards, and we talk about frictionless, I'm going to stick with that theme, then we shouldn't prevent that choice from happening. If a vendor, and we have them today, says, you know what, it's too costly, to Manish's point, if it's costly, it's going to be tough for me to integrate with you. And that prevents the dealer from a choice that that individual wants to make. We deal with this, I'm dealing with this now with at least 2 of our prospects. And it's nothing about a particular vendor doesn't want to do the integration, or you know what, you're an adversary. I don't think that exists amongst the vendor community. It's like, okay, so how am I going to get there? So with a set of standards, that dealer will now have a choice that they can make without interference from, well, you know what, it's going to take us 6 months to get there. These are real problems that we're trying to solve for the dealer and for their benefit.
So I think we start to hear common themes. Cost, it's a significant cost when you don't have any standards. We talked, Mahesh was talking about the data quality issues and the ability to securely transfer data from one system to another. We're talking about the ability of provide choice to all our dealers, so our dealers and our customers can actually get the software that they actually want without being preoccupied with the fact that they don't integrate with their current technology stack. And so, Eric, I turn to you. We've been talking about this for almost 10 years now. And, I've been to your dealer and we talk about the frustration and not being able to provide the customer experience that you want to provide as a dealer to your customers. Can you talk about your pain points and how do you feel that the STAR standards or common data set standards can help the dealer, and why dealers need to be concerned about having a set of standards?
Well, it's funny, you look at outside of our industry, I look at telecom, for example, and there was a tipping point for the FCC when they created the Portability Act. And prior to that, if you remember, you couldn't port your number over from a carrier. And when that changed, that really proliferated, I think, the expansion of what we saw happening with smartphones and so on, and innovation. So I think the struggle for us in the retail world is that the lack of standards really stifles innovation, and it stifles productivity. And so when we look at things like these words that get thrown around in our industry, like digital retailing, for example, digital retailing means a lot of different things to different brands and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's just sort of enhanced lead generation. We're pushing the customer farther down the funnel. We're getting more data out of them at the end of the day. But it's not really a transactional, end-to-end commerce transactional experience that customer expects to have today, right? When they look outside of our industry, they're used to pushing a button and something happening without a lot of friction, right? That's what they know. And if you listen to generational speakers talk, if you didn't know what it was like before, that's the way that it is, right? So if you think about what's coming up, the younger generations coming up that are living and breathing in iPads, and God knows if they'll be immersed in some metaverse. But the point being is that their expectations are going to be even higher than what we're seeing today. And so for us, as we look at what's happening in consumer direct models where they get to build sort of a clean sheet of paper, and we have all this legacy, I think for us as an industry, it's important that we establish these body of standards, that we leverage what STAR has created as an excellent foundation. And I'm very happy to now have dealers be a part of STAR, because I think for so long they've been left out of STAR, ironically enough, when we are probably closer to the customer touch point in the journey than anybody, and we have to deal with such a wide cross-section of providers. And I'm glad that we'll be able to provide now a lot of feedback and input and get hopefully the momentum that we need to push this forward to our industry, because at the end of the day, and I'm sure you've heard these philosophies from Amazon, day one versus day two. It's always day one, and it's always about the customer. And if we don't deliver what the customer expects, where are we going, right? So we're going to lose out on that. And so I think we owe it to ourselves as an industry to push this agenda forward, raise awareness, get the support from the OEMs to push this down to the vendors, making sure that these vendors are effectively adhering to STAR standards and are certified by a certain space of time. And this way our entire industry will have those foundations in place, like Mahesh talked about with the transfer of information between an Android and an iPhone, et cetera. That's going to happen naturally.
So let's turn to the topic of compliance with regulations and the cybersecurity topic. As you heard from our good friend Brad Miller from NADA the other day at the general session in STAR, he mentioned the new safeguard rules and the impact that that's going to have on the quickly approaching deadline of December 9th for all dealers to comply with these new safeguard rules. We also have privacy laws coming up. We've seen the law in California. I believe there is some law getting worked on in Florida, and there's some others. And we've seen the law that came about in Arizona, where it's calling actually for open standards for the whole industry, not only dealers, but OEMs and vendors all to work in an open standards. By the way, the Arizona law calls for the STAR standard by name. So how can we, the OEMs, vendors, as well as dealers, can collaborate to actually help our dealers meet the significant challenges, not only with the current laws that are coming up, but there is a ton of others that are in the horizon and coming very, very soon. So Guru, I'll give you the first answer there.
I think it's a big welcome change. Certainly, the right step. I mean, I'm assuming it's more of that to come. I think what we should do is it's not going to change overnight. It's going to be a progressive evolution. As vendors here, like Mahesh is here, myself, and other vendor partners, we should be taking this pretty seriously and starting to actually comply and work on them. And certainly the journey is going to take a while. With respect to Arizona, certainly some work to be done. We have to work towards it. Yeah.
Manish, you want to comment?
Yeah, I mentioned this a couple of days ago at the CDK GSO meeting. I think starting with NADA, STAR, all the suppliers, OEMs, I think we need to join forces and create a message that goes out consistently to all the dealers, right? There's stuff that the providers need to do. I mean, single sign-on doesn't exist in all these, fragmented systems. OEMs also have their old legacy systems. So we have done that as an OEM. We have sent out advisory like a few years ago for awareness. But again, dealers have multiple franchises. If they get different messages from different OEMs, which one should they follow, which guideline? So I think as an industry, through NADA, we need to come together, create a good messaging, and enforce that, from different channels.
Can I just add? So I think that I also think a lot of these things are welcome in, especially the security standards. I think that those are important beyond this industry. Every industry needs to be much more secure. We're in a very different world than where we were before. And cyber threats are real, right? So us thinking about that carefully is very, very important. But what I would also say is, you asked the question, how can we help each other on this? There's so many things coming out in the legislation. I think some of them can actually be ambiguous. And I think we run the risk of actually not fulfilling the spirit of what is being asked. One thing I think that could be a benefit is actually us defining, based on the legislations, defining what the minimum standards are in clear English, right, that we can leverage and then go deploy, and then people can do more or less. But sometimes these legislations come out as somewhat ambiguous, and then you're left trying to figure it out, and that's where you run the risk, because everybody does it differently again. So if legislation can be a power for getting us on the same track, or it could actually lead to much more spread of capabilities.
So Lisette Gold, head of automotive for Google, was speaking here in the live stage, I believe it was yesterday, and she was talking about frictionless buying. And we also heard the CMO from the Asbury Auto Group, Miran Merrick. He was talking about the guest experience and beginning with that, and then working his way back to actually align his technology stack and business processes to be able to deliver the guest experience, as he called it, that customers demand today. How challenging would that be for us to achieve that vision of frictionless buying, as well as promoting an unbelievable guest experience, if we don't have a proper set of common standards across the industry? And I'll begin with you, Manish.
So let's talk about the customer, right? We're not talking about the customer. And I shared this with some of you. The customer today is comparing us to other things they do in their life. They watch Netflix on their mobile phone. With 1 or 2 clicks in less than 10 seconds, they can open anything that's happening in the world. Telecommunications, that industry, you can order your phones and plans and everything online. So the world that the customers live in, that's the normal thing now. But when it comes to car buying or car servicing, we're not there as an industry, right? So if we don't have standards and if we don't align, it'll be difficult for the dealers, especially the smaller dealers. How can you switch to more progressive providers because you are stuck in this fragmented environment. So our customers, they'll still buy the car, but we want them to be excited about that. And I gave the Apple example the other day. Apple was creative in having the store experience. People don't buy as much from the store, but they go there because they're excited about the product. They're excited about cohorts and talking to each other. I mean, just imagine, even now our cars are so tech friendly. They're going to get more technology. Wouldn't you want customers to come to the dealers to learn more about the technology and be excited about the technology, where all the friction can be removed, where they can do all this online? I think that's what we need to look at as an industry. And everyone's looking, but with a lack of good foundation and a standard, it becomes very, very hard.
So, Mike, I'll come to you. If you have to, obviously you believe in STAR, you believe because you're here with us, you're a member of STAR, as well as, CDK and Techion and others. If you had to speak to other vendors, why should they join you and join STAR in this effort?
Sure. If you allow me, I'm going to try and combine 3 of your questions into one. So
Okay.
I'm going to first go with to some of the points Mahesh made. We can take something like multi-factor authentication. So if you say there's a regulatory or compliant component now, let's say take MFA, it's no longer now a competitive advantage to have multi-factor. It is a standard. It is a standard that is being applied to the new car dealers to have these types of controls. Well, then what does that mean? Because we all have, 4 of us have systems up here, and Eric has to use them. And he has his own data that lives inside his world. So there's a real example, I think, where if you want to remove friction, because instead of us trying to figure out independently how to solve that problem, that's going to give my company more resources, Guru's company more resources, Hyundai more resources, CDK more resources to go create innovative solutions that then Eric can take back and say, well, I can create a consumer experience because I have vendors that are applying more time to building innovative products or finding innovative solutions than figuring out how to just comply with a set of standards that have been put down on the industry. So from the vendor community, I think we're going to get there. I'm going to challenge, to some degree, you surprised me that NADA, I don't know if NADA is playing enough of a part.
They're a member.
They're a member.
They're a member, yes.
They're a very good lobbying agency. The other side, I grew up in the car business, so we live on both sides of the NADA fence. We're dealers and we're vendors. I think if there's an additional push from the dealer's perspective, I think everybody else is going to really come in and you'll see a lot of results come from improved standards.
Same question, Mahesh. If you're talking to other vendors in the industry, I think you mentioned the concept of crowdsourcing knowledge, right? So we're better together. So why should other vendors join us in this effort?
So look, I clearly think that innovation is, speed is reduced when there are no standards, because everybody is left trying to figure out a lot of basics. It's like having a city without standard roads. You need standard roads for people to get around, and then we can focus on building the cities and building all the other stuff. When we're spending all of our time trying to figure out these different things, and then how my stuff will translate and move into his system, and how his system data will move into his system, and then Eric's trying to stitch it together at the dealership, we reduce innovation and we fragment user experience when we don't have standards. So there's value for everybody.
And the customer is sitting over there saying, frankly, I don't care how you do it, just get it done, right?
Yeah. Give me a simple experience.
Yes. Guru, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, just to emphasize on everything, everybody has said, if you look at plumbing as an example at home, definitely plumbing is an important thing. If it is done once really well, the consumption of water or anything, you could do it in the way you like. And that's pretty important. And standards are like that. We also spoke another analogy, the electricity, right? If you have, different adapters, it's absolutely impossible, you can fit in things. So it's important that we actually come together, and look at standards as a very serious thing. And going back to the frictionless buying, if you look at auto industry, like Manish mentioned about Netflix, Amazon, the consumers are looking for that kind of experience from auto industry, like buying or servicing their car and all of that. This is absolutely possible. I mean, from product standpoint, the same innovation is absolutely possible. Unfortunately, the thing which is actually a hindrance is lack of standards. It's important that we need to come together. From dealer perspective, I strongly believe, if the dealers actually continue to, talk to the providers to use some of these standards, it will definitely gain momentum. And for us also, it is, an encouraging thing. We should be able to invest and, use those standards, more aggressively.
So Manish, we have many OEM members. Toyota is a member, Ford, GM, Volvo. You're here in this panel with us today. Speaking to the OEM, why should they be part of this effort as an OEM as well?
Yeah, so I'll actually build upon what Mahesh had said. I would say we are on a longer cycle for innovation because we don't have standards. So from an OEM perspective, we're making beautiful cars, right? We rather focus on improving the experience instead of dealing with integrations. If we have to switch vendors today, it's like a open heart surgery, and I think it's likewise for the dealers as well. So to me, all OEMs should also come together because our competition is on the product, and then our competition is on the experience. Let's focus on that. Happens today in the airlines industry, right? The planes are the same, or there are two companies that build the planes. The companies are focused on the experience, and that's what the consumers buy. So it's a win-win for all, dealers, vendors, and the OEMs.
Agree, Eric. I can only imagine the pain points that you have. Why dealers should care about participating in STAR and ensuring that we get to the goal of a set of common standards for the industry?
I think dealers have been overlooked for so long, especially in the technology arena, because I think there's a general thought process that they don't really understand tech or data as well. And I would challenge people to rethink that I think there's a lot of smart dealers out there. We do understand technology in the process and what that means to changing and transforming these customer experiences. And I believe that the dealers are in the best position to really provide the feedback and the insight to sort of validate and sanitize some of these thoughts. We talked a little bit about, Brian Pash gave a nice presentation the other day, and he talked about being the scientist in that book. And I thought that was a great approach where, listen, this is what I believe, but prove me wrong. And I hope that you prove me wrong, and that type of attitude. And I think we all have to have that in our industry, and not be so sort of arrogant in our ways, because this is really about the customer. So I really like that approach, and I also think this is something that we have to really transform and take the lead with now, because we're at the precipice of major transition in our industry with the onslaught of electric vehicles coming, and what I would see is sort of this ubiquitous connected vehicle environment that's going to be spouting off tremendous amounts of data that will be further exacerbating what is already a major issue with friction if we don't solve this today. And that's something we should get ahead of so that we can understand, A, how to process it, and B, how to actionize this data to create those experiences. So I'm going to be reaching out, obviously, to some key dealers that I feel will be great stakeholders to drive this mission. And as you talked about, I think it's imperative that NADA and Mike endorses and sanctions STAR officially and formally, and I'm going to ask them that today. And I also think it's important that the rest of the OEMs in this entire auto industry, and I think we have, 5-6 members of STAR at most, and we've got over, 35 OEMs. So there's a lot of OEMs out there that need to become members of STAR and join this initiative so we can push this entire industry forward. And
I think we come to a point in our industry, we ran out of time, but I just want to make this quick point. The fact that we're here is showing that we are at a point in our industry that there is a willingness to collaborate for the good of our dealers and their customers, and to make remove the friction that is there today. So thank you so much for a great panel. Have a great day. Thank you, all of you, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you all, gentlemen. Wonderful job, wonderful job. We are going to continue moving forward with our sessions this afternoon.